and you already introduced yourself, so I guess if you want to say anything else before you start this.
Sure, yeah. It's an honor to be here with you all, and hearing everyone's backgrounds and expertise, I think we could start a pretty badass movement.
We're already doing it.
It's happening. It's happening. So, yeah, Brad asked me to come share, and I have a couple threads of overlapping interest with this. So, primarily, I work at an Ibogaine clinic as a researcher doing outcome research, kind of standard applying, Western traditional pre and post outcome assessments with addiction with Ibogaine patients that are primarily coming for heroin, prescription pain addiction. Few people show up for like benzodiazepines, alcohol, cocaine. I also recently had an experience in Costa Rica with the Medicinal, which was my first experience. I kind of felt like a poser in a way doing this research and never experiencing it myself. But I also sought it for my own healing as well. And after this experience, it just catapulted me into my own kind of heart sense of wanting to share this medicine and do any kind of advocacy work that I can. My background, I started off as a pastor, actually a Christian minister. I was a music pastor for 5 years and fell in love with doing spiritual counseling and direction with college-age students, and felt like I wanted to go back and get more training, and then went into graduate school for psychology at a small liberal arts Christian school in Pasadena called Fuller. And so I co-trained. I got a master's degree in spiritual theology, and then went on to my PhD in neuropsychology. It's a clinical psychology with an emphasis in neuropsychology, so I could get licensed, which I'm studying for now, doing all these nitty-gritty online tests to get licensed. And throughout my training, I worked primarily in geriatrics, and 3 years I was here across the street at the Alzheimer's Disease Center and worked in neurology here in Building 300, doing clinical rating for like dementia, drugs, pharmaceuticals that were coming out. Throughout my training, I tried to get really broad experiences. I worked in psych hospitals, inpatient, addiction centers, a lot in like nursing homes and hospice. And so I share your brother's passion to integrate this with geriatrics. And my other interest in this also is psychedelics and plant medicine as like forms of brain therapy. And I just got through with our medical director at Crossroads, Dr. Dan Engel. We co-authored a chapter on the use of psychedelics for brain repair, for like traumatic brain injury and neurodegenerative disease, developmental disorders as well. So I had my own experience with Lyme disease, which is another reason I was curious about iboga, which Lyme disease, if you don't know, has all kinds of devastating effects on the central peripheral nervous system. So I was curious, reading all this, it kind of made sense pharmacologically and experientially that this could help. And I'll share a little bit about that as well. So yeah, if you want to click the next slide. So just a little bit of background. This seems to be a pretty educated group, so this is kind of like your basic Wikipedia level background. So iboga is this shrub or this bush. That's the plant name Tabernacle iboga. It's considered an entheogen, a sacrament, a medicine, a psychedelic, as well as, I don't know how you say the word, I think it's oneiophrenic, but it induces more of a dreamlike state than a pure psychedelic state. So it's qualitatively and phenomenologically pretty different from other psychedelics if you have experienced it or just heard about it. It has these little like pepper-looking kind of fruits on the bush, and it can grow up to 10 feet, but it's a fairly small type of bush. It's indigenous or native to Western Central Africa, Congo, Gabon, Cameroon, and it's a sacred medicine in these cultures. It's a master healing plant, kind of the top of the totem of plant medicines for these people. And it's so revered in the year 2000, the government considered it to be a national treasure, and there's all kinds of protections now being done that have been put in place. I believe in Gabon it's illegal to export it, and there's conservation efforts. There's all, it's been over harvested. So the point now where there's another plant that contains ibogaine that a lot of the clinics, including our own, are extracting for use because it's such a limited resource. It's the legality of this plant in its plant form as well as its extract form is just all over the world. It's all over the map in terms of from fully scheduled illegal to just kind of gray area like you have in Mexico, to somewhat permissions for medical use, banning for recreational use, and then you have full legality in some places. And I think Brazil is kind of like at the forefront of this. They just, I don't know, announced 2 weeks ago, they're like kind of the first university medical hospitals to launch these formal ibogaine research trials for addiction. So they're kind of like paving the way as pioneers in this area. And of course in the US we're kind of like last. Not last, there's been a lot of good work done. I think some of the main people are, if you want to look them up, Jeffrey Camlett, Kenneth Alpert, and Deborah Mash were kind of the big university researchers that looked at this, and it got shut down in the 60s due to politics, drug companies. What you see online is kind of the cardiovascular risk. There's been some deaths with this. It's kind of probably the most dangerous plant medicine that I am familiar with in terms of mortality risk and this kind of thing. So you want to advance the next one? So the people group that is kind of embedded with this plant is the Boiti, and there's 3 kind of ways the Boiti show up. It's kind of a graft hybrid with the pygmy people in Africa. And there's the Babango, the Mitsago, and the Fang. And I think the Babango is closest with the pygmy. Some of this is not my knowledge-based area. The Fang was like a later development, I believe, out of the Babango, and they have this more kind of syncretic influence with Christianity, which is kind of interesting. So you have like ancestor worship, communing with the dead, and then you have your Jesus on your altar there with all the shakers and things. So it's pretty interesting. So they found a way to integrate these things. And from what I've heard as well, the Fang has is established as a religion, I believe, on the East Coast. They don't use the plant yet, but there's a presence in the U.S. And it's, in terms of its spirituality, it's very simple. It's not this kind of exorbitant ascended master galactic. It's very like practical life, kind of just practical theology. Live your life, live simply, be happy, be yourself, be authentic. It's very, very pure. It's kind of just basic philosophies. They use this plant in a number of different ways. The most well-known, perhaps, you see a lot of ibogaine documentaries, which there's a lot out there, so I encourage you there's quite a few. The BBC did like a 5-part series that you can look up on YouTube. That's pretty good. They use it in these initiation ceremonies for men as well as women in their adolescent area, in the adolescent time frame. So this is like you're coming of age, stepping into adulthood. It's also like a confrontation with death. And there's a death experience on a physical level as well as on a spiritual plane. A lot of times they have to make contracts with people, and iboga providers will do this, that if you're in the medicine and you see like a fork in the road and one is like leaving your body and one is staying on earth, like stay on earth, because I don't want to be the iboga provider that send you to the coroner or something. So it's serious. They use it in a lot different way than we do. In Westerners, I mean, when they do these initiation ceremonies, they're taking these massive doses of root bark, just spoonfuls, and they're dancing for sometimes 48, 72 hours. And the thing about this medicine, which is nuts, is like, I mean, when I was on it, I felt like I was like 20 beers in. I mean, you just can't even stand. I couldn't even walk to the bathroom unassisted. So trying to do like a fire dance with this is kind of like, quite a feat. They also use it in hunting. It has a stimulant effect, so if you do like microdosing, if anyone's done that with iboga, it kind of has this clean, natural Red Bull coffee effect without the jitters. And it has a host of other properties, but at a low dose it's like a stimulant, and when you do a flood dose or a shamanic dose, you're up for a few days. So, but you're not bouncing around, you're pretty much laid out, unless you're a Bawiti Jedi. Let's see here. Yeah, it's been likened in some ways, like where ayahuasca is more of a mother, maternal, grandmother. This is more of a paternalistic father type of energy that kind of just is direct and confrontational. It doesn't really mess around with you. It kind of shows you on a soul level in a direct way. And for me, when I was on the medicine, it's like kind of on repeat until you ingest and acquiesce to this lesson that the medicine is trying to show you. It'll just kind of keep kicking your butt with it until you kind of get it. So yeah, go to the next slide. So the terminology can be confusing, especially people that haven't done any reading on it. The terms have the same root. Ibogaine is the extract of iboga, so it's kind of like, perhaps a crude analogy might be like cannabis and about 7 or 8 spoonfuls of this dry, like rhubarb, which can be, pretty, like chewing cinnamon or something. So the alkaloid is a lot easier. It's just capsule form, and one or two capsules, like maybe, I don't know, maybe 500 milligrams or something, is enough to really put you into that visionary space. There's a secondary plant, the voacanga, which has been used in place of the iboga bush because of its limited availability. And when you hear about addiction treatment, research on this substance, it's usually ibogaine. They're not using iboga because it can be standardized. There's a dose level, and with the alkaloid and the root bark, and ibogaine is a lot more potent. So at our clinic, the dosage we give of ibogaine is perhaps 2 to 2.5 times what you would want to do for a spiritual type of journey. And that is to really reverse the withdrawal effects of opiates, because people are coming in, slamming high levels of heroin and Vicodin and all these things. And kind of the magic with the addiction reversal is at this higher level dose. Next slide. So it is restricted. These are, again, it's all over the map in terms of the globe with where it's permitted and restricted, and it's changing all the time. These are some of the countries where possession is illegal. As of right now in the US, it's illegal. There was a brief time frame where research was happening, like I mentioned earlier. Deborah Mash did some studies, but again, that was shut down, I believe, by the FDA. And the DEA is cracking down on people who are doing this kind of underground. But it's pretty prevalent as well in the US underground, because people are desperate and hungry for cures from addiction. The other standard options, if you're hooked on heroin, which is now cheaper than prescriptions, you have not very many options. You could go on Suboxone, methadone, do some kind of other opiate replacement, and the idea is to taper you down over a certain amount of months. But I worked across the street at the Veterans Hospital, and you have guys that are hooked on methadone for like decades, and they're coming and getting their dose, and they just cannot get off of it. And people who've been on Suboxone, which can be very effective, it's also highly, highly addictive, and ibogaine is not addictive. Even though the Schedule 1 status would suggest that it has a high potential for abuse or even addiction, that's really not the case. It's 100% the opposite. I cannot be more blown away when you do the research and you look through even the peer-reviewed studies. The medical benefits of this plant are like mind-boggling. It's anti-addictive. It has these antidepressant effects, this anti-anxiety effect. There's been studies where it is like a antiviral for hepatitis C and HIV. There's 3 or 4 studies in the NIH database about being antifungal, so killing candida. And it has this strong kind of dopamine effect in the brain, and Parkinson's disease takes out one of the primary organs in the brain, is the substantia nigra, which produces dopamine. And there's been some pilot work around it being used as a treatment for Parkinson's disease because it can actually regrow dopamine cells in the brain. And I just saw today there was a patent filed by this company in Salt Lake City for using iboga or ibogaine as a treatment for neurodegenerative diseases like Alzheimer's, which we know is like, the statistics when you look at it are pretty mind-boggling in terms of the prevalence is just so much increasing that we're gonna, bankrupt ourselves. And there's really, I worked on 2 trials just as a rater here in the drug studies, $100 million. They failed with flying colors. They're just totally ineffective. And it's looking like, from what I see, it's more alternative therapies that are going to be the way with this. There is a profound medical risk with ibogaine, but there's a couple of things you can do that really mitigate that. So at our clinic, we do EKGs before that are looking at the patterns of the heart. And we will not treat people if they have some kind of arrhythmias, any kind of cardiac issues, because it is hard on the heart. And in almost all the cases of death, they went back through some review articles. They looked and saw, okay, in all these examples of people who died, what happened, because ibogaine has this sort of stigma attached to it, and the main reason why research hasn't been done is because it's dangerous. And what they found was that pretty much every instance, if you rule out a pre-existing heart condition, or you rule out people who are addicted that are not reporting that they're on Xanax or something else when they're coming into their treatment, that was pretty much all the cases of death. So there's a pretty clear pattern. So if you do your preparation work medically and you're monitored medically, it's relatively safe. Is my experience. And you have to be careful. That's the one thing I wouldn't want to go up to a shoebox shaman on the corner and do an iboga journey. You want to have your prep work. Where I went, we weren't live monitored at Crossroads, in particular because the dose is so high. We have, every person that's in a bed has a live monitor going throughout their whole journey, and if something happens, they're hooked up to an IV and they can shoot them with something to, resuscitate someone if they slip into the death realm. So, next. So,
Joseph, I had a question.
yeah.
Did you, I thought I saw something recently, and they could check into it, that there was an effort somebody just posted something to try and, get it rescheduled recently?
In the U.S.?
Yeah.
I'm sure
Did you
there's
see anything? I was
efforts
just trying to
being
find the
done.
article, but John Harrison posted something recently, or the last month about it, and I didn't get to.
Yeah, I think there's advocacy
Was it the
groups.
Vermont thing?
I don't know.
Yeah, that's the latest. In Vermont, the opiate problem is so bad that the people of Vermont pushed the bill with the senator, I believe. It's under review to do a pilot program to legalize this treatment for opiate addiction, because people are just dropping like flies in the Northeast because of this. And it's going. You just have your average suburban, breaks a leg, goes to the doctor, gets pain pills, they're stuck, and then they go to heroin because it's cheaper, and there's not a lot of good, effective options. So in Vermont, I think it's under review now,
Okay.
I believe. I read the initial bill and it was really bizarre the way it was written. They copied and pasted the cannabis dispensary protocols and just kind of put in Ibogaine. So it's go to your local dispensary and get your dose of Ibogaine. And I think that was just the initial pass, so it's been revised. So yeah, that's the most to my knowledge.
Okay, maybe that's what it was.
Yeah.
I'm sorry to interrupt, but
Yeah.
you were referencing the proper prep.
Preparation.
Could you just give a couple of examples of something that might be inadequate preparation or some specifics about what would be?
Yeah, medically or spiritually or anything?
Kind of both.
Okay.
For those of us that haven't done it or.
Yeah, it doesn't have such a strong dieta as ayahuasca, because there's not a lot of direct interactions so much. people want to be clean in terms of their eating. So a lot of people do just physical detoxes before because you can have more purging. It is like kind of a detoxifying substance. So eating clean is helpful before. We don't treat people that are actively using alcohol. It's kind of a direct contraindication. When people are on a lot of the long-acting opiates, like especially methadone, which stays in your system for a long time, we try to get people way down on some of those before they come in, because just the methadone detox is like months, or I don't know if you know, but the methadone, those long-acting opiates, they clash and they can cause death. Benzos are a big no-no, Ativan, Xanax. Trying to think if does anybody else know any other?
Yeah. I mean, you can't be on any stimulants for at least 5 days. So you have to get off any Adderall, any Ritalin, or anything like that. Benzos, actually, you advise people not to be on benzos, but if people are physically addicted to benzos, they can undergo treatment. Benzos just kind of dampen the experience like they do with any psychedelic. For instance, when I did it, they gave me a Xanax right beforehand to calm me down. Can't be on any antipsychotics, any antidepressants, mood stabilizers. Those have to be suspended for at least 7 days. With Suboxone and Methadone, they need to be off them actually for a period of 1 to 3 weeks. And so oftentimes they'll transition to a short-acting opiate in that interim, because most people don't want to go through the withdrawal symptoms of Suboxone and Methadone. And the problem with both those is methadone is dangerous because of the cardiac arrhythmia enhancement it causes. Suboxone just blocks ibogaine altogether because of its high binding affinity on the opiate receptors. So just ibogaine won't work. They'll come out and just be sick, which sucks. Alcohol's no-no. And then there's a long list of just kind of interesting herbs and stuff that people aren't supposed to take, like black cohosh and stuff that have to do with various things dealing with the serotonergic system and other things, but those are the main ones.
Yeah, I think it's kind of, when I got into studying the pharmacology, which I'm not a pharmacologist or a psychiatrist, I was like dumbfounded. It's like the most complex compound in the brain. It's like works on almost every neurotransmitter system. So it's really a kind of unknown with antidepressants and these medications. So it's just safer to be off of them, because we don't know. Yeah.
During a dose, are you basically monitored but left to experience it on your own, or is it similar to maybe like what I've currently understood is psilocybin therapy, where two people work with you through things? How is it?
It's kind of variable depending on where you go. So for the most part, you're kind of left alone across the types of facilitation. If you're in the Buiti, that'd be like the maximum. You're doing dancing, you're interacting, you're being asked questions, you're getting more spoonfuls of rhubarb. They also use it in the Buiti tradition to get information from their ancestors. So there can be some dialogue happening where someone might be asking you questions to seek information. And where I did it at Iboga Wellness, and in the Buiti way, they have you write down questions that you want to ask yourself. And one of the cool things about this medicine is that when you're under it, you can kind of conjure up your soul in front of you and directly interact with your higher self. So it was really beautiful. They had us write down questions. You can be nauseous and you have a lot of vertigo and stuff, so you're laying down. And the images are coming so fast a lot of times. For me, they did. Not a lot of people don't experience images. Maybe like 80% of people actually have a visionary experience. Other people just don't. Things are happening so fast. When someone was asking me questions, it's like watching a movie and fast forward and trying to like keep up with it with the facilitation. So I think with this, some facilitation can be really helpful, but to interact with a practitioner for any extended period of time, I think would be challenging. I don't know if anyone else has any experiences with that. But,
The therapeutic dose for addiction, is that like 22 milligrams per kilogram, is that?
I believe it's 15, it ranges 15 to 22.
Yeah, 15 to 20.
15 to 20,
It's
yeah.
kind of dynamic depending on people's sensitivity. They're taking.
But that's what you're talking about, the high dose with the insulin.
Yeah, and then the other thing, one of the knocks against Ibogaine is that people say it's neurotoxic, and there's only a couple of studies that show that, and they were like rat studies where they're given like 3 times the dose you would give a maximum blood dose. There's some suggestion that it might be neurotoxic to the cerebellum, the back part of the brain that regulates movement, but if anything, it's it's a healing to the brain. So, yeah, right.
Just a quick question, is schizophrenia contraindicated?
Yeah.
Probably is.
Acute psychosis, yeah, for sure.
Someone with a history of in the family also?
Family history, not so much from what I've heard, but this does really push the dopamine system. So I think Dr. Cole, you did a paper on mania, right? Post.
Yeah.
It can push people into mania. I mean, I felt like I was borderline manic after my experience.
I've heard, like, even people who didn't necessarily present generitis for which were the cases that I saw, that in general there's a lot of people who reported reduced need for sleep, which just not sleeping one night for someone who's predisposed to bipolar 1, that's like extremely dangerous.
Yeah, it can be destabilizing for people. And yeah, there was a guy when I was there, he was up for like 4 days, you know, so it can be intense. Yeah.
And is it purging similar to ayahuasca involved? Yeah.
It's not as much. It's more of like, I mean, I think ayahuasca has a direct purgative effect. This is more of like a detox effect, and it's less frequent. I think people who have addiction tend to purge more because they just have all this residual chemicals and usually are physically not as healthy.
The
So
purge
it's
is also like, it's more like just nausea rather than, like, in ayahuasca, there's like a lot more meaning to the purge.
yeah.
That makes sense.
I didn't feel like I was purging entities out. I felt like I was like just
Nauseous.
getting clean.
It can happen, but yeah, it's mainly the nausea, most people.
I understand you may stay out for like a few nights, but how long does the actual thing last?
It's kind of active for about maybe 36 hours or so. It's long. This is kind of like the marathon of plant medicines.
But the main trip, the
Main trip is
experience
probably like 12 hours.
12 hours.
Something like that. Yeah, long.
Quick question, Charles. Charles, you said you beat addiction. How many times have you done Ibogaine?
I did Ibogaine once for addiction, and then I've done it once for another time, and I've done Iboga 4 times.
Okay, so
So the first time I did Ibogaine, I felt somewhat cheated. My experience was very, very muted. It was just there's one critical epiphany moment, but the whole visionary experience didn't happen to me. And since I'm an avid user of psychedelics, I wanted to have that, so I did it again. It didn't happen the second time, so I did Iboga 4 subsequent times. It didn't happen any of those. So I'm going to keep at it.
So you never got it, but you still beat heroin. That's amazing.
Yeah, well, yeah. I mean, it does what it does, And for me, the visual representation was less important to the actual internal healing, the introspection that happened. The catharsis still occurred emotionally, even without seeing my soul, as Joseph explained. I mean, what he explained is an amazing experience, and I've witnessed people have that. But for me, it's always been just this internalized process as opposed to a visionary process.
Yeah, that's a really good point too. This medicine, it's not really, you can't take it to the bank that you're going to have a visionary experience. Like it's really variable. That's what in our research, that's what we're finding. Like it's just all over the map. It's healing for people. And it's really effective for kicking opiates, and it has a lot of other benefits. But people that are like, psychonauts that want to blast off or can be like, I want my money back.
Just do it a bunch.
Me?
Yeah, question.
Yeah, another day I was talking to a therapist in Brazil about it, and I was talking to her about taking somebody else to experience Ibogaine, and she said, well, what if it just kills one addiction, but then the person is in that state of mind, and then substitutes one addiction for another. Like you that have had experience with it, how do you?
I would say that's not true. That can happen with people that have addictive personalities. If you're,
Okay.
you know, you take away someone's booze and then they're going to gambling
Right,
or
okay.
something like that. But the cool thing about this, about iboga, is it's been shown to have a global anti-addictive effect. So
Thank you, that's what I
like cocaine, alcohol,
That's awesome.
benzos, opiates, the actual, you know, there's more in common with addictions on the brain than there is distinctive. So that kind of dopamine reward path where like, I feel bad, I gotta reach to something outside of myself to take away my suffering. That kind of impulse is kind of broken
That's amazing.
through this. So
Okay.
yeah, I mean that might be true for some people. What we found is like a third of people do relapse just because addiction is such a long-standing pattern. It's ingrained, and then if it's in you're den with your needles and your
Right.
drug-addicted girlfriend or whatever,
Right.
it's like a recipe for relapse. So
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
said a third of people relapse, meaning that almost 2/3 are actually like getting rid of their addictions.
yeah, from our research, just on a rudimentary crude level, 1/3 of people like never touch their substance again, like not even once. The other third will maybe have some experience again, but it'll be a far reduced level, and they kind of will self-correct and eventually come back into sobriety over maybe 6 months to a year. And the third go back to using, and a small percentage of those people actually, I think in our study it was like 6% actually used more than they were using before Ibogaine, probably because they were depressed, it didn't work, perhaps. So it's not a magic bullet, but it's much more promising than some of the other treatments that are out there. Way more promising.
Thank you.
What period did you follow them? When you say a third, you never went back to it, how long?
Yeah, I'll actually have some stats I'll get into, but it was an online retrospective study, and we surveyed people from 2012 to 2015. So it was anywhere for people 4 months out of treatment to about 5 or 6 years out. So it was kind of a broad time frame, but that was the both ends of the time frame.
I may be a little ahead of myself here, but I know you're talking about people not experiencing like the visionary aspect. How important do you think the balance is between that and the metabolite Noribogaine? Because I know Deborah Mash was theorizing that there was like a lot of weight in the Noribogaine that was preventing the addiction.
Like, so you're asking does the visionary component correspond with Noribogaine more
No.
so versus Ibogaine?
Like, do you think the visionary experience is as important as maybe like the metabolites of the compound itself? Like if you could like replicate Noribogaine, I think I was talking about this at Visionary Convergence with someone, and they said that Deborah Mash has a patent on Noribogaine.
I don't know. So Ibogaine breaks down as metabolized into Noribogaine,
Yeah.
which is a fat soluble thing that stays in your body.
From her research, I thought that that's what sits on your kappa and mu, like opiate receptors, for like up to 3 weeks.
Yeah, it can be. People have like an antidepressant. They call it the Ibo afterglow. For like 2 or 3 months even.
Yeah.
But yeah, it stays in your system.
So-
I don't know the answer to your question though about the visionary component of that. So
Yeah.
look into it. That's interesting.
I'll speak to that from personal experience. I have never experienced the massive visionary thing, but I have experienced a sort of annihilation of the addictive process without the visionary
Yeah,
experience.
same here. Yeah, you don't need to. Similar to ayahuasca. I mean, you don't always see stuff with ayahuasca, but you still have a healing.
But I think having a profound mystical experience is a good thing. And I think that really helps, but there seems to be two different things going on.
I guess what my question is, if I put it clearer, would be: do you think if you could build Noribogaine itself and give that instead of the Ibogaine, do you think that would be effective?
In inducing visionary states?
No, in curing addictions.
Yeah, people are doing that. I don't know so much the arguments before and after. I think the Noribogaine has less of the undesirable side effects. And there's all kinds, I think there's 3 or 4 chemical derivatives that are being developed where they're trying to kind of parse out the unwanted side effects from the wanted benefits. There's some people, like I believe I heard Kenneth Alpers say that the visionary component is actually, if you take that away, it's less effective in reversing addiction because a lot of the downloads people are getting is why they're using, what led them to use, and how they're kind of destroying their lives. But with the Neurobiology, I'm not sure. I think I haven't looked into it enough. Yeah.
Yeah, so this is actually a two-part question. So about 2/3 of the people who take Ibogaine have visionary experience, and a third don't. So where these studies are taking place, I mean, are you quoting from, actually it's a three-parter, are you quoting from one study or an aggregate of studies when you talk about 2/3 visionary, 1/3 no visionary?
So I'm kind of doing a crude meta-analysis in my mind. In ours, it was like 80% actually. So out of 101 people, 80% of people said they had a visionary experience. I think there's only one other study that I've seen. It was lower, it was like 70%. But no one's really done the research yet to kind of definitively establish that with a larger sample. I think ours might be maybe the biggest numbers-wise so far. But 80% is still pretty high. I mean,
Yeah. So now for your particular study, was there any kind of psychological assessment like Rorschach or MMPI done with the individuals before, this kind of said where their head was at before they took the Ibogaine?
No, we didn't give them personality inventories. We do now. Pretty much most Ibogaine clinics are operating in they don't have big infrastructures and they don't have money and research paradigms. I don't know if maybe ours is one of the only ones that has actual active research happening. Maybe there's 2 or 3 others, but I mean, this medicine it can shift your personality. I don't know that you'd expect someone's MMPI profile to shift too much. Probably their mood stuff, which tends to be more fluctuating in general, would probably shift, but the long-standing kind of characterological embedded stuff, I don't think that would shift. What we do is we give people an addiction inventory, which includes like asking you about trauma, mood, anxiety, psychosis, self-harm, some of the kind of standard psychology boxes. But that data hasn't been included yet in the study that we did. So we just implemented that recently. So now we're doing pre and post 6 months on that addiction inventory, which it's the ASI, the Addiction Severity Index, which is kind of like the gold standard in opiate studies. So like Suboxone, Subutex studies are using that as their kind of MMPI for changes in addiction. And that looks at like substance abuse, psychological functioning, community involvement, financial issues, family conflict. So we'll have the numbers on that. We have like 100 people who are administered that, and I think now we have like 10 so far who've gotten their 6-month follow-up. So the cool thing about this in research is it's like wide open. There's like not that much has been done. So it's kind of a playground. So what you're talking about doing, I would love to give people Rorschach's, MMPIs, and PAIs.
Yes, they do cost a little bit of money to administer, I imagine.
Yeah. So.
And the final part of the question is, the physical setting where the people are taking the Ibogaine, is it a clinician with clinical room with a beeping sound and white walls, or is it like an oceanfront property with the waves and the sun and this? Where's the physical environment? Because I imagine that would make a big difference as to what kind of experience they're having.
Like set and setting, right? So.
Set and setting, yeah.
Yeah, it depends on where you go. So. Crossroads we have 2 facilities. One is very clinical. I mean, it feels like you're in a hospital. You're in a bed, you got an IV in your arm, you got your EKG, you got your doctor and your nurse.
They try and make it nicer than that.
There's a singing bowl and candles, a laser thing on the ceiling.
Yeah,
I gotta self-promote. So yeah,
It's cool. It's a cool.
It's a Zen
hospital.
hospital setting. So, yeah, we got a Himalayan crystal salt lamp on that. Yeah, so it's as Zen as you could make a hospital.
Yeah.
So
Yeah,
pretty cool. Yeah, it's nice. You have that, and then you have people just doing it in their houses underground, and then some of these retreat centers, they're like on the beach. You know, we at Crossroads, we have a beachside property for aftercare, or after the treatment. People go there, like after they come out of the haze a bit, like 48, 36 hours after, they go to Rosarito, to a house that's right on the beach. Where I went in Costa Rica, it's kind of in the jungle, and there's monkeys coming up to the back of the property, and you can see I got a couple pictures in here. You can see the ocean. It's like a block away, so it makes a big difference. Yeah, I think you want to be comfortable for sure when you're doing it, and you just being connected to some kind of sensory, soothing, aesthetic environment or nature. You just get a lot more interplay with the plants or with the environment, seeing the sun come up. We were out, kind of laid out on mattresses, looking out at the stars, and watched the sun come up, and that was beautiful. It was profound. And yeah, I think I like Crossroads in terms of it has the good combo of like the medical safety. So if there's any anxiety about the risk, you're pretty much as hooked up as you can be medically, and you have compassionate staff there. Where I was at, I was a little bit nervous. There's no live heart monitors, and they didn't have, you know, resuscitation paddles, or, you know, so it's kind of a little roll of the dice, but, you know. Did that answer your question?
Yes.
It's so complicated. I don't know if you guys have read, you've probably read stuff on this, but the primary system that it works on is basically every system. It's NMDA, which is associated with learning, and also excitotoxicity, isn't that right? Which is like, there's a dementia drug called Namenda, which has this effect. When you have this NMDA antagonist effect, it's a protective against like inflammation, and it's a neuroprotectant. So it can also be involved in learning and unlearning. So for addiction, it can be powerful. People have these learned patterns of self-abuse and proclivity to chemicals. It can break that learning cycle. One of the magical parts of Ibogaine is it increases glial cell line derived neurotropic factor. Try to say that 10 times fast. It has this amazing ability to regrow dopamine cells, sprout new dopamine cells, which there's very little in medicine that has this effect that we know about. There's not too many compounds that you can say reliably grow new brain cells with neuroplasticity and neurogenesis. So this is one of the...
Joseph, was that done with rat studies or something, or are they actual humans, they have evidence of that?
I haven't seen any human studies. It's pretty much rat studies, like basic science studies and rat brain slices.
At what point and what period of time is there that growth of cells?
That's a good question. I don't know the answer to that. Yeah, I'm not going to even try to answer that question. I don't know the time frame. But it is, in particular, if you have someone who's addicted like methamphetamine or stimulants, it kind of blows out your dopamine circuits. And all substance abuse that is happening over time has some detrimental cell death, you know, some adverse effects to the brain. So the fact that this is not only interrupting your addiction, it's healing your brain from the damage you've done because of your addiction is kind of, you can't say that with methadone or Suboxone or any of these other treatments, that it's regrowing your brain from the damage you've done. And that's some of the promising effects for neurodegenerative disease too, this regrowth phenomena. It definitely upregulates your dopamine. I remember, you know, afterwards I just felt like the best I had ever felt in my entire life. I mean, I just felt like I could conquer the world, and I went with my girlfriend, and all we wanted to do was snuggle and be mushy, and just felt so good. And it did have a kind of a tapering off effect, but I felt like a definite cognitive enhancement effect for myself. It has this agonist effect for different opiate receptors, and it upregulates serotonin, serotonin transporter. It doesn't always have a direct effect with dopamine and serotonin. It's like these secondary pathways where it's having its effect. Also affects nicotine system in the brain, so there's some suggestion that it might be helpful for smoking cessation. You have also like ayahuasca. I don't know if it's as strong as ayahuasca, but this resolution of childhood trauma. One interesting thing, there's an author I like named Alan Shore. He's a UCLA guy here. He's a psychoanalyst and a neuroscientist. And he does all this work on early infant brain development, and he talks about how the right brain develops earliest in infancy. And the right brain, or the right hemisphere rather, is more visual. It's more associated with how we store feelings in our body. It's more like unconscious. And the reason we don't have conscious memory in our infancy is because we don't get that until we have language, which is more of a left hemisphere kind of phenomena. So Ibogaine is very visual, so you can see these images blast through that are like snapshots of your childhood that have these emotionally charged memories that need to come out of you and need to be rewritten. You know, a lot of psychotherapy is about narrative and the schema and rewriting the stories surrounding these embedded traumatic experiences that we store in our gut brain, in our body, in our peripheral nervous system. So there's that effect too. We know most addiction, like Gabor Mate is beautifully described. You know, punishing someone with an addiction is like punishing a child who's been abused. You know, because the majority of people who are really struggle with addiction, it's based in trauma. You know, it's based in, maybe it's not explicit trauma. It could be neglect. You know, it could, and that's even harder to pinpoint what didn't happen for you. You know, what wasn't there for you. So all those shame states, we know they get stored in the body and they can persist. And that's, to me in psychology, this is like the most exciting thing, because the whole part of psychotherapy, as we know, it's like helping people access what's in their body, what's unconscious, and to have something that just kind of like brings like a crock pot, brings it up, you know, into the conscious mind. It's like invaluable. Therapists use hypnosis or relaxation techniques, body awareness techniques to try and get people to tap into that. But that's the beauty of this. And the cool thing about psychedelics is, for the most part, our brain information flow goes top-down. Top-down processing in cognitive psychology, we know. And a lot of these compounds are showing, they take that information flow and they go like this, you know, it's bottom up. So what's stored in the body, in the limbic system, and the animal brain is able to come up into conscious awareness. Because normally we spend all this time kind of, our superego or whatever is, we want to be in control, we want to be in the driver's seat. And these medicines kind of have us take a back seat, you know, sometimes. So we could go to the next slide. So these are some organizations. We have a lot of people in the room. Sita's with the plant teachers. She's not in the room, but she's head of the plant teachers. A few people said they worked there. A few of my coworkers from Crossroads are here. There's an awesome international conference happening in March, and we're going to be presenting some of our data there that Cherie worked on. Maps, of course, ICEERS. These are kind of, I would say, Gita, ICEERS, and MAPS are probably at the forefront of Ibogaine research and the community, and actually moving legislation. This Drug Policy Alliance, they're pushing legislation as well. So if I could share anything with you from my heart, like with this, the fact that this is not legal is like a crime. It's we should be outraged.
Yeah.
But it's also obvious why, right?
Yeah, we know why. So
to that point,
yeah,
is it one of those things where our research has shown that like basically people would make money on it because they couldn't put a patent on it, or what?
there's so many different interests. What we're told is because of the risk profile, because of the deaths. Yeah, it's like...
Because we don't have the amount of money to put aside, so not for the being sued, for the people who are going to die from the drug anyways.
Yeah, well there's that. It's kind of like the whole psychedelic bucket is in the same way. Like you can't, the patents are not easily filed. No pharmaceutical company is going to invest hundreds of $millions in something they can't privately own the patent for. It's been restricted for research, so there's not enough research. So it's really easy for providers now to say, well, there's no research, so it's risky. It's this woo-woo voodoo magic. And then you have people like MAPS, like to get MDMA through. It's like 20 years of fighting with the DEA and the FDA, and then they're not getting government funding. What are they doing? They're like doing crowdfunding campaigns to do phase 3 clinical trials, which is like never been done in history, I don't think. But it's like to get it where there are those tightly controlled, randomized, double-blind, placebo-controlled studies. You're looking at like $100 million or something to go through all the steps, which are helpful and also incredibly restrictive. We want to know all the safety and stuff like that, but people are dying in the hundreds of thousands from opiate addiction. So it's like we got to like fast track this through. So is that answering your question?
Yes, sir.
Yeah. Yeah. Go ahead.
Is there any potential for Alzheimer's with this?
Yeah. But there's a couple links. So Alzheimer's is a disease of like protein aggregation and misfolding, inflammation, cell death. Ibogaine, what I wanted to share for me was, well, I won't go that path. I would say it's like anti-inflammatory, regrows brain cells. Alzheimer's disease, like one of the two drugs that are out there for the most part, Aricept and Namenda. Aricept boosts acetylcholine, I believe, and Namenda is an NMDA antagonist. And I believe Ibogaine has an acetylcholine effect. Don't quote me on that, but it for sure has an NMDA antagonist effect, which is neuroprotective. So, yeah, it's a more clean path with Parkinson's because of the dopamine connection. All the Alzheimer's drugs pretty much have failed. They tend to, like when you look at the slopes of someone with and without one of those acetylcholinesterase inhibitors, they end up at the same spot. So like someone on the drug and off the drug over 5 years, at the end they're still like severely demented, but the person who took the drug, just their slope is a little slower. So there hasn't been any work done on that, to my knowledge, so there can't be any claims made. But maybe if we talk to some of the psychopharm people, you can like look at the two mechanisms and the diseases and see, well, does it make sense that what Ibogaine does could have an effect on it, So, and there's a patent, like I said, for neurodegenerative disease, which is a big bucket, but that's been filed already for this.
The reason I asked is that I got an email about has $4 million for a grant for novel treatments for Alzheimer's. And I thought first of all of microdosing psilocybin, but I couldn't find enough in there to warrant that. So there's probably not enough even animal model studies yet to warrant $4 million grant.
The problem in dementia is like apathy. So it has a stimulant effect, and the only thing the drugs do is delay progression. They don't reverse disease or stimulate new brain cell growth, and this does stimulate new brain cell growth. But it's not like, it doesn't look like it's, to this point, like global brain cell growth. Like Alzheimer's disease is specific to primarily like the medial temporal lobe of the hippocampus. I haven't seen, I think there's actually some research that shows that it's protective to hippocampal neurons, so that could be let's do it.
So yeah, pilot study in Mexico maybe.
Yeah.
I apologize if you already referenced this, but in terms of the results with addiction resistance, do you have information on the number of times that these
Of, that they've received Ibogaine?
Yeah, like the numbers of people that have responded with addiction resistance to, let's say, one use versus, it happened after like the third time.
So we asked that in our survey. We're just starting to crunch the stats now. There was one study, Schenberg, which we kind of replicated their study. It was done in 2014, and they found that people who did a second administration had like a 20% better outcome or something with it. So I did 2 journeys myself, and it makes sense that more would be better potentially, especially if someone has such severe and like long-standing addiction. But that study needs to be done. My sense is it could be helpful. Now, one study does show, I mean, it's a peer-reviewed article that at least the second time is 2 is better than 1.
And how far did you wait in between your 2 journeys?
For me?
Yeah.
2 days. So yeah.
Jump back in.
Yeah, so it's at Iboga Wellness, they do 2 journeys in a week, and you have a 2-day break in between. So yeah.
Making sure how much that was.
Cost-wise?
Yeah.
It's $3,750. We did a trade, so I had a discount, but yeah, it's worth it. I mean, yeah. And then at Crossroads, ours is about $3,500, I think, for 3 days. But that also includes a journey with Sonoran Desert Toad 5-MeO DMT, which is a really potent tryptamine that kind of works like mushrooms and times 10 and fast forward. This is the most potent. Biologically, yeah, it's the same. Experientially, it's yeah. Yes.
Yeah, we were talking about this before, but what's your sense of how well the 5-MeO enhances the efficacy of the Ibogaine?
Of the Ibogaine?
Especially in particular for addiction treatment.
Raise your hand if you know about 5-MeO DMT. Okay, for you. So, yeah, it's a powerful tryptamine. It has this really strong antidepressant effect. It's way different than the Ibogaine. It's fast acting. It's like 30 minutes. You vaporize it. There's chemical forms. It's in organic state. It's in the Sonoran Desert Toad that's in the southern part of the U.S. and northern Mexico. People call it the God molecule, or DMT, like the spirit molecule. We're doing some research now. Cherie's helped with me on this a bit, and we have, I'm in a roundabout way getting to your question. There's a couple doctors in Mexico that have shared this medicine with like thousands of people. Gerardo or Jerry Sandoval is one, and the other one is Octavio Redi. And Octavio has like immunity from the UN to bring this medicine around the world. And what we're finding, we had 500 people's testimonials. After they did the toad medicine, they wrote down their experience, and pretty reliably people are saying they saw God, they saw Source, they saw the divine light, they had really spiritual orgasms. Some people had terrifying experiences. They went to the nothingness, the void. What's keeping your life from being just the good life, the simple life? Because the Bwiti are really simple tribal people. They don't have these complex material systems and modern stresses. They're just fishing and hunting and you know those Western neuroses. So this pathway, though, after you're in the medicine, that pathway seemed like Mount Everest. Trying to walk up that.
You didn't walk up that?
Yeah.
Oh, jeez.
You got a guide with you, but I remember just that stairway was just like, just rolling out. It was intense. But yeah, they started us off with a spoonful of root bark, and I would equate it to it felt like having a few beers, but more transcendent, more clean. Kind of tingling in the nerves. and then they used total alkaloid capsules. So, and everyone was different. Like one young guy had a spoonful of root bark, and he was like, oh, I'm feeling it, I'm gonna go lay down. And then there was other people that were like, you know, triple dosed up, and they were not even flinching with it. So once you start to feel the effects of the medicine, you feel your equilibrium kind of off, then it's time to go up and lay down. And it also is like, you know, fire ceremony of letting things go, putting things in the fire that you want to, you know, don't want to in your life, that you want to be dissolved and burned and left. And they had this beautiful root bark. It was like, they said it was one of the best batches they had. It was like 34-year-old root bark. So it's the shavings from the base of the plant. So, yeah, I want to, next slide. So, yeah, I purged for sure, but it felt good. And it looks like, it's not like any other psychedelic where I saw a lot of tracers and everything was just kind of wobbly. But when you close your eyes, it was like a TV screen popped up, and all this, it was like a square, like with static. It was really bizarre, and just images, really fast, passing through my mind's eye, and I could kind of control it. So it was like having an iPad, you know, in your view. You kind of scroll through. You want to fast forward, want to go backwards, and then other times there was visions that like I think I was meant to see. I had a really blissful experience, but I also saw some like carnage and violence, and it looked like medieval France or something. It was really bizarre. And I was like, next. I was like, no, you have to, you know, hang with this one. But because you're on the medicine so long, you just have this like epic anthology. If you're having visions of like, it's like watching a 12-hour movie. So it's like, what do you talk about, or what has meaning? So I just kind of popped in the most salient ones for me. I saw this beautiful tree of life over the earth. It was like this kind of Kundalini DNA-looking spiral just going up to the top of the cosmos. And it was like the roots of the tree were like lifting the whole earth like this. And for me, I saw like angels. I don't know if it's because it's in my consciousness, but I saw Christ flying on the top. And I saw plant medicines, different plants and leaves like coming down, and got the sense that like these plants are here to like literally lift the earth, the consciousness and the vibration of the earth. And I was crying. It was so beautiful. I saw at the end, it was so cool. It was kind of like an off switch flipped at the end of my journey. I saw this little pygmy looking guy out of the corner of my eye. I had asked the medicine I wanted to commune with my grandfather. And I didn't really commune with my grandfather that much, but just at the tail end, it was like the medicine said, okay, it's coming to a close. And this little pygmy guy came and like went, like flew into my heart. And I looked down and I said, what's your name? And he said, I'm Peter. I'm like your guardian. And I'm here to protect you. So he's sitting like on my heart, and he said, I'll like be with you. You know? Be with you. And I felt a sense of my grandfather. You know, that was his name, and I was named after Peter is my middle name. You know, it did look like a TV screen. I got a little picture of a TV screen. It looked like that. I asked the medicine to like show me his spiritual shit, you know, show me the spiritual realm, you know. And I saw, it was weird. I put this little picture of Africa. It looked like if you had that picture of Africa like on a stick and you spun it, it like spun like that and then dropped in, and then I was like visually transported into this Bwiti or pygmy like village of people dancing around a fire. And that wasn't in my database, in my memory bank. I hadn't seen that in anything before. And it was like, this is the beginning of time, how people lived, you know. This medicine comes from the oldest part of civilization. It's like one of the oldest medicines and oldest root races. And it just reminded me that our life is simple, we make it complex. You know, we made it complex. I saw my soul, it was like when they were asking me questions, I had written down like, Joseph, what's holding you back in your life? And a lot of it came through as like limiting beliefs, self-limiting messages that I had put up. And I asked myself, like, what do I need to hear, self, what do I need to know? Like, please tell me. And like a better looking version of myself popped up in the mirror, and he just went, Joseph, you're a badass. Just be a badass that you are. I was like, I'm a badass? It was like really cute. I tend to be one of the self-deprecating side, so it was like really like healing. And then with my Lyme stuff, I have this kind of residual just brain fog, and I've had like low-grade depression for like 15 years. I've done everything I could, and I felt like, it's gonna sound weird to say, but I felt when I was on the medicine this like sweeping happening through my brain tissue. It felt like there was a broom like sweeping out the garbage, like whether it's aluminum, fluoride, yeast, I have no idea, calcification or something, but there was something on the surface of my brain tissue that it felt like it was clearing away. It felt like when you go to the get a haircut or a stylist and they're like doing this in your head, it just feels amazing. It felt like that, but it was like inside my brain. And also I have some neuropathy, and I could feel healing happening on my nerves as well. So that really inspired me. While I was on the medicine, I had this 2 tracks. I was having my experience, and then I was thinking, holy shit, like the world needs this medicine. All the people I've sat with in therapy that are suffering, that are stuck in trauma, all the people with addiction, all the people with neurologic diseases, like it's not a panacea, but it's like needs to be accessible. So I think I have one. This is some of our outcome data. I'll just do this for 5 minutes and stop. We give patients when they're in treatment, they have a self-report scale of their own cravings. So like, how much right now do you want to like use dope? How much right now are you wanting to shoot up? How uncomfortable are you with your withdrawal symptoms? Because as we know, coming off of heroin, has all kinds of nasty physiologic, bodily, unpleasant effects. So we go to the next slide. So this is like 49 patients, or I forget what it said. It's predominantly males that we get, a lot from the Northeast as well as the West Coast. Majority are Caucasian. So these are slopes rating scales. This is a patient's own reporting of symptoms of opiate withdrawal, so like nausea, cramps, sweating, aches, tremor, anxiety. 21 to 30 would be severe withdrawal symptoms. So when they're coming in, they're just shy. Let's see, moderate is 11 to 20, so they're in the higher end of the moderate range of withdrawal symptoms. And at that time, they're on morphine, yes, short-acting morphine. So there's no point in time where they should be having withdrawal. So they're on morphine. Day 3, they're given Ibogaine. As you can see, it's a more than double reduction in their withdrawal symptoms by day 5. So it's like day 3 is when the medicine is. So 48 hours after, they're it's really dramatic. And then we don't keep assessing people on this scale, but this is like while they're in treatment to see if they need to go higher, if they need more morphine, or they need like root bark or more alkaloid after their flood dose. We do that as well. We give a flood dose, and then we give them alkaloid or root bark after. Next slide. This is their psychological cravings. How much do you want to use? 12 would be severe, 0 meaning you're having no cravings. They come in around an average of a 6, because they're still, they're maintained on their opiates, so they shouldn't be craving too much, but they are experiencing that. They're starting to come down. They might be anticipating not being back on their drugs. And by the end, their cravings are at a 2 out of 12. Next slide. This is our online survey that we gave 100 patients, primary opioid heroin dependent, main age range 25 to 54, 72% male. Most people had tried other treatments, Suboxone, methadone. And these people were also given the toad. Next slide. So this is kind of cool. These are percentages. So during, what's someone's experience during Ibogaine? 77% said their withdrawal symptoms were eliminated. 86% had visions. 60% said it was sacred or spiritual. 45% experienced a feeling of unity with reality. And this is about their Ibogaine, not their toad. With the toad, it's probably closer to like 90% would say that. 43% released shame and guilt. 41% gained insightful knowledge about themselves. 40% got insight into the causes for their addiction. 34% recalled difficult memories from the past. 30% gained insight into trauma, past trauma. 30% said they were reborn. 25% had bliss or ecstasy. So these are phenomena, but they're pretty variable. You know, when you get down to the lower part of it, it's just about a third of people experiencing this. So it's not a reliable experience, but it's really profound. You know, these are things that drive people to death sometimes. Some of these symptoms of persistent shame and addiction. Next slide. After treatment, 84% said Ibogaine was better than other addiction treatments they've tried. 79% said it was effective. So it's not everybody, but it's the majority. 77% said the frequency of use went down. 73 to 74% said the psychological need and cravings decreased. Next slide. That's it. I wanted to, I'll just stop there.